we can try and gauge some of the highest bounties in the world of One Piece we haven't seen yet, because Oda has revealed to us a lot of high bounties already. We now know that every admiral in the world of One Piece, based on the Cross Guild, has a 3 billion berry bounty. That is Kizaru, Fujitora, and Greenbull. Furthermore, Garp Chujo also has a bounty of around 3 billion. Furthermore, Luffy, Kid, and Law, the 3 Prima Captains during Wano Country, all of them currently have 3 billion berry bounties. So that 3 billion berry bounty mark, I think, does a lot of things in terms of the One Piece story overall. But for this video, I think what it does too is that it could give us a nice little check mark, a nice little stop point as to gauge who could be higher or lower than this 3 billion berry bounty based on various things like the notoriety, their position and rank, and of course, how powerful they are. And someone who is right above this echelon in terms of bounty is someone like Draco Mihawk, where Mihawk has a bounty currently of 3,590,000,000. Of course, in notoriety and in fame, a former warlord of the sea and the world's strongest swordsman, him having a bounty higher than every admiral, I think makes a lot of sense in most folks' minds. And I believe that from here, based on Mihawk, and then based on the admirals and Luffy and Law and Kid and Garp, we can try and gauge other bounties in the world of One Piece, both past and present, and bounties that need to be absolutely updated for damn sure as we go through this decade of the One Piece story. And first and foremost, the people who absolutely positively need updated bounties in the very near future are Dorry and Brogy. Dorry and Brogy's bounties are a century out of date. No one knew what happened to them over the past century or so. Their pirate crew was somewhat defunct, and X, Y, and Z and the other. The world had forgotten for a century long the might of the red and blue ogre giants Dorry and Brogy. And now we're seeing them come to the forefront, deal with the Buster Call, them and their giant crew. Deal with a Buster Call. We saw Brogy take down a Vice Admiral with ease with a single shot. And keep in mind that during Marineford, every giant that we saw was a Vice Admiral. Every single one. So to me, it all makes a lot of sense to see Dorry and Brogy get major bounty increases after this arc. Let's say if they don't pass away. There are theories out there that they're gonna pass away. I don't think so. I would say again, they're gonna still be alive, and I would expect them to have bounties probably in the billions. That may sound like much, honestly, but consider the fact that in chapter 1108, Vice Admiral Bluegrass talked about Saul and how Saul was a pretty strong individual, and he himself was also a Vice Admiral back in the day. But Dorry and Brogy, in their standing in the world of One Piece, Dorry and Brogy should be exponentially stronger than someone like Saul as the captains of the giant pirates. Come Elbaf, there could be an Oden, a Thor, a Loki where they're actually more powerful than Dorry and Brogy, fair enough. But for the time being, I think that Dorry and Brogy's bounties, 100 million, I think they're way too low. And I can see them being, let's say, in the 1.5, maybe even straddling the 2 billions. Huge jumps. I can definitely see Oda doing that, particularly when they're being so effective against a Buster Call. And then right now, they are en route to assist Luffy against potentially all 5 elders. Bounty buffs are imminent for those two, I would argue. Now from there, let's go a little into the future from a century ago, and let's focus on some of the top men during Roger's heyday. And who better to start off with than the first mate of the Roger Pirates himself? Rayleigh, I would think in my mind, in some respects, should be relative to Mihawk in bounty. And of course, a lot of this stemming from the themes of Mihawk, Rayleigh, and Zoro, where Zoro being the first mate of the Redhaired Pirates, you would think in your mind would be relative to, let's say, Rayleigh and beyond Mihawk in the future, obviously, because he will be eventually the world's strongest swordsman. And very, 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 very likely that Rayleigh himself wouldn't be in that sort of 5 billion echelon along this Captain Goldie Roger. Because that put him, let's say, in the same ballpark as someone like Whitebeard, and that's hard to believe. So I would say in terms of bounty, Rayleigh's gonna probably be relative to Mihawk, but I would say under Mihawk. Maybe close to Mihawk, but I would say none that's under Mihawk. So Rayleigh in my mind, let's say be a 3,503,000,000 berry bounty man. The reason why I want to say 503 is because that's the first chapter Rayleigh meets Luffy. Chapter 503. So I could see Oda doing something like that, where it's a play on numbers. So 3,050,300,000, something of that sort. Once again, another variation, another play on when, again, Rayleigh first met Luffy. And speaking of that point in time too in the past, we know that Shakuyaku and Rayleigh, they have some sort of thing going on between each other. And we now know that she is a former empress of Amazon Lily. So there's a safe bet here where she has a bounty relative to Boa Hancock. Whether it's higher or lower, that's Oda's choice ultimately. So I can see Shaki having a bounty of, let's say, 1,580,000,000. And the 580 million would be hearkening to her birthday. Even though we know more, we don't know much about her character like in a general sense. So to pinpoint like the exact number a lot of times can be hard to do. And that's particularly true with the other person that Roger said was one of the strongest members of his crew, Scopper Gaban. Scopper is missing through and through, like unironically through and through. People will insert Scopper into every, even myself, we will insert Scopper into every possible situation that has an aura, a veil of mystery around it. And it's like, Scopper's this. Scopper, like for example, Scopper could be the person that's the captain of the Black Pearl, the black ship that could be housing the last road poneglyph, the one that Seed of the Rain talked about. That maybe could be Scopper. Who knows? Where is Scopper now? Maybe he's on Elbath. Maybe he's, let's say, on Vera. Another location touted to be a potential spot for the last road poneglyph, stated in the Road to Laugh Tale Volume 1. So, don't know. But what we do know is that because Roger claims that Scopper is one of the best men of his crew, along with Rayleigh, Scopper in some respects should be relative to Rayleigh in combat ability. How relative? Up to you. Again, no one really knows. But I would say, let's say for example, if Rayleigh is at 3.5 some odd billion, then let's say Scopper could have a 3,109,000,000 berry bounty. And why the 109 million? The reason why is because Scopper's debut chapter was chapter 19. So he could be at 3,190,000,000 berry, or any other version of 19 that we could embed into his bounty. Or let's say if Rayleigh is gonna be in the low 3 billions, I would say over an admiral, but let's say in the low 3 billions, let's say at 3 billion, 50 million, so on, then I can see Scopper being in the high 2 billions. But that right there is, honest to God, the best I can do for Scopper Gaban. Until Oda gives us something, anything else, other than Roger's comments, we just have to say that Scopper is probably relative to Rayleigh, but ultimately under Rayleigh somewhat in terms of his bounty. And someone else who is just as tricky as Gaban, maybe not as much, but still pretty tricky in terms of gauging their bounty, would be someone like the Chad of Wano. That's right, the Chad of Wano, Kozuki Oden. Because it's very obvious what we actually see on manga panel and the things that Oda says about Oden in his SBSs. Oden gets wanked. Oh man, Oden and the Chad of Wano gets wanked to the highest heavens. Oh yes. And there's been debates about Oden's power. Like, where does Oden lie in the pecking order of power? Because even though he didn't have a black blade, Enma is a busted as all hell sword. That's for damn sure. And the fact that Zoro had to struggle to like just utilize Enma appropriately in Wano country, knowing that Oden could give his haki freely to Enma without any issues, and then on top of that, knowing that Akainu mentions Oden by name in the ultimate chapter 957, and the man was a member of both the Whitebeard Pirates and the Roger Pirates. Oden knows, or he knew, what the One Piece was. Oden gets a lot of wank. He gets a lot of love. I'm never going to forget SBS 100. The reason why that god White Boar was still alive, even though Oden cut it in half, was because Oden's cut was so clean, he didn't damage the cells of the boar. That's stupid. Massive amounts of glaze. Kaido back in the day, it's kind of admitted to that if Oden had attacked them immediately, they would have been in trouble and they couldn't take Wano country. But he chose to do the 5 years of dancing and so on and so forth, which allowed them to amass their forces and then ultimately overcome Oden and his troops. But Oden gets a lot of love. That's for damn sure, without damn doubt. And we know he got even stronger after this time period with the Roger and Blackbeard Pirates. So it is debatable, honestly. It is debatable if Rayleigh is weaker than Oden. Is Oden stronger than the Dark King Mayo Rayleigh? Because Oda does wank Oden to the highest heavens. However, because of notoriety, I'm willing to bet here that Rayleigh had a higher bounty than Oden. Oden might have had a higher bounty than Scopper. Fair enough. But Rayleigh, given notoriety, right-hand man of the Pirate King, probably not. Just based on notoriety alone. On paper skills, who's to really say? Maybe in the future we'll have a fan-made death battle of that. But regardless, I would say that his bounty should be again, relative to Rayleigh and relative to Scopper. And in the anime, they did add fight scenes between Oden and Gaban when the Redhaired Pirates and the Whitebeard Pirates fought. So let's say Oden, relative to Rayleigh and relative to, let's say, Gaban, of a bounty of around 3.222 billion. Yeah. Now, why 3.222? Because the Chad was born February 22nd. That's 3 2s. And the 22nd of February is National Oden Day in Japan. So I can definitely see his birthday and his bounty matching because it all locks in with Oden. What is also locked in, without a damn doubt, is the notoriety, the fame, the acclaim of one Rox D. Xebec, the man that wanted to be king of the world. According to Sengoku, what was Rox D. Xebec? Potentially Gold D. Roger's greatest foe. Yeah. We know that Roger, during God Valley, wasn't like at the peak of his notoriety. Same for Whitebeard, because Whitebeard was actually under Rox D. Xebec. So there's a good chance that at that point in time, during God Valley, Rox D. Xebec had the highest bounty in the world at that point in time, an even higher bounty than Roger and Whitebeard, because my assumption is that they have their maxed out bounties once they achieve their biggest accomplishments, and that would be much later on in their lifetimes. Because of the idea that he is potentially Roger's greatest foe, if Whitebeard is at 5 billion and Roger's at 5.5, I can definitely see Rox being in the middle of that. So he'd be, let's say, at a 5.3 or a 5.2 billion berry bounty. And again, at that point in time, the highest bounty in the world. When we do continue the God Valley flashback, when Oda finally just buckles down, here it is, here's all the good stuff. Don't be surprised if Roger and Whitebeard have lower bounties than Rox, particularly Whitebeard. Because why would Whitebeard, who is a subordinate of Rox, have a higher bounty than Rox himself? As far as I can tell, it is absolutely not a buggy situation. That's one of one. The subordinates of the crew will have a lower bounty than the captain of the crew. And that also applies to the Golden Lion Shiki. Yes, Shiki has most of the stuff in the movie, Strong World, true. But Shiki is a canon character. He's noted to and shown in the manga and in the anime. And there's a whole episode and chapter dedicated to his events in the past. That is Chapter 0 Strong World, Episode 0 Strong World. Shiki is nuts. Shiki used to rule a part of the New World alongside with Roger, Whitebeard, and at that point in time, a younger Big Mom. I believe that's stated in the Ace Light novels. His events of Escape and Pull Down are canon, and the events beforehand, so him taking on both Garp and Sengoku at the same time, 2v1, those are also canon. Oh yeah, listen, personally, I wank Shiki. I can see Shiki having an even higher bounty than Kaido. Not in the 5 billions, he'd be under Whitebeard, but in the very, very high 4 billions. I've heard the idea before that Shiki in some ways is kind of like Gaban, so he'd be right underneath Whitebeard, which I thought at the time was kind of strange, but I can kind of see it now where, okay, maybe he wasn't as good in terms of, at least notoriety and bounty as someone like Whitebeard, because we know that Whitebeard eventually, he claims the largest territory in the New World, which is part of the reason why he's known as the world's strongest man. And so there was a good case that no matter what, Shiki always had less claim, less territory. So Shiki being the high 4 billions, like 4.8, 4.9, 4.7, I think is absolutely fair for the Golden Lion. And who absolutely, I think, could be in the 4 bills. Here we go. Now let's jump from the past to modern day. I think it's possible that Akainu could be in the 4 bill as Fleet Admiral of the Navy. Among all the admirals, screw Kong, don't even ask me about Kong, but among all the admirals, I believe that Akainu would have the highest bounty. And if every admiral is at 3 billion flat, then the Cross Guild may give him a 4 billion. I would say either 3.5 or a 4 billion. I don't see any crazy unique numbers for Akainu, because the Cross Guild, again, they give every person that was admiral a carte blanche 3 billion berry bounty. But then let's say relative to Mihawk, would Akainu have a higher bounty or a lower bounty than Mihawk? And personally, I can see someone like Akainu in Marine history being the strongest Marine. Of course, in the future, Kobe will make some substantial gains and be either the #1 or #2 all-time Marine, some of that sort. But I'm talking about present day and in the past. I can see Akainu being the top Marine because Oda Like with Oden, Oda wanks Akainu to the high heavens. He wanks him. And just given his rank, he should be higher by default than the other admirals. But again, it all depends on how high Oda envisions Akainu, which again, I would say is pretty highly. When he says that Akainu can like find the One Piece if he was in East Blue in like 1 year's time, given his powers, yeah, I mean, that's a lot of wank. And I'd also argue that Garp in his prime would also be worth something similar to like what Akainu is worth now. And then I'd argue that Sengoku would, let's say, be relative to that in some respects too, because Sengoku is a former fleet admiral. So if, let's say, the current admirals are at 3 billion, and then Garp is also at 3 billion, because Sengoku was a former fleet admiral, he could be at 3.5 billion in terms of bounty. Let's say the same thing as Akainu and potentially a prime Garp, or he would be 500 million under Akainu and under that prime Garp. So that's what I'd say. Again, Garp is a bit weird because Garp, I think, is higher than his bounty's worth in his prime. Not necessarily now, but in his prime, I would say for sure. And I'd also put Garp's former disciple, Kuzan, in that same range of bounty too. Because Kuzan fought against Garp for a period of time on and off screen on Full Lead Island, and we don't see most of that fight, but for every attack that Garp gave Kuzan, Kuzan did not go down. Keep that in mind. Every attack that Garp gave him, Kuzan did not go down. And it's hinted at 2 times that Kuzan was holding back. He was hesitant. He was doubting. And it's not like Kizaru where folks theorize as of late. They theorize, they speculate that as of late, Kizaru has been holding back, but still following the mission. No. With Kuzan, it is told to us overtly as clear as day. No speculation needed. And what did Rayleigh say to Luffy at the end of the pre-time skip? To not doubt. That is power. And Kuzan is doubting tremendously. So Kuzan, I can see having a higher bounty than the other admirals, but not as high as Akainu, because Akainu beat him during the time skip. So let's say if Akainu is at 3.5, then Kuzan will be at 3.25. Something of that sort. That's the way I envision it. Keep in mind this fact too. Kuzan is the 10th Titanic captain of the Blackbeard Pirates. He is a subordinate of Blackbeard. Therefore, he is weaker and has a lower bounty than his captain. Oh, Buggy, 1 of 1. Buggy is 1 of 1. Leave him alone. All right, let him cook. The fact of the matter is that Kuzan's bounty should not exceed someone like Blackbeard's bounty, and that should apply for every member of the Blackbeard Pirates. How many people in the Blackbeard Pirate crew have a bounty over 1 billion? Obviously, the reason why I have to do it this way is because it's hard to tell who has more notoriety, who is superior in strength from member to member, with the exception of, I'd argue, 3 guys. Blackbeard, Kuzan, my number 2 of the crew, and City of the Rain, my number 3 of the crew. City of the Rain has that notoriety compared to Magellan himself. And Magellan was pretty damn powerful and Impel down. I've seen folks gauge him to like even as high as other admirals, where folks say he's just as strong as a current Green Bull, Kizaru, Fujitora. That's how high some folks gauge Magellan. If he was his equal back in the pre-time skip, after a 2-year time skip and gaining a whole new ability, it's very, very likely to see the Rain is stronger than Magellan now. So part of me can definitely see Sea of the Rain being in like the middle 2 billions or like the low 2 billions, maybe around Crocodiles. Personally, I do see City of the Rain being a fight for Rono or Zoro in the future. And I can't see City of the Rain having, let's say, a similar bounty to what Blackbeard had at the beginning of the time skip. So like a 2.2 billion bear bounty. Yeah, I can see it happening for damn sure with City of the Rain. Out of all the Titanic captains, who could be above 1 billion? I mean, obviously a lot of folks would say they're Scream Von Auger because of what happened in episode 1093 with that gas. Fair enough. Fair enough. Is it canon? No. No. It's not canon, actually. Not at all. However, it is a lot of hype. And even in the canon, when he was looking at J. Garcia Saturn, what do you guys want? The world. Like, whoa. And Katarina, because of her, she has the power now to transform into J. Garcia Saturn. Yeah. And Jay should be aware of that in some capacity. Probably. Hopefully. For their sake, right? That's the idea. But man, Katarina, Von Olga, maybe Burgess, because I do have my doubts for Burgess, especially after Sabo ethered him into oblivion in Dressrosa. Oh yeah, I have my doubts. Maybe Avalo Pizarro, Because Pizarro has ion ability, which is pretty powerful in of itself. The ultimate is just a souped up version of Pika's power. So like with Pika, attacking the main body should be a whole different story. That being said though, I wonder, let's say, if this applies to every island. So for example, if he were to say have the island powers in Dressrosa, could he control like the whole island way better than Pika can? Probably, but not all islands are created equally. Some are substantially larger than Dressrosa. Places that are teetering on like large country, even continent size at times. Let's say Alabasta, huge island. How much of Alabasta could Avalo Pizarro control at will? Because Alabasta is massive. The same for Wano country. How much of Wano country could Pizarro control? What if he was in Elbaf? Oh, yeah, Pizarro, I think, could be at 1 billion plus too. Though even though his scale is bigger than Pika's, in theory, very, very likely actually, he's also kind of like Robin, where doing damage to the island itself does damage to him. We see that with Garb and we see that with Kobe. So if he is in the billions, probably just barely in the billions. And here comes the dark horse, not stronger, Laffy. People praise the word of Laffy. They praise the word of Laffy to the high heavens. Laffy is like the stealth king, the Sly Cooper and Thief overlord. Folks have not forgotten in the pre-time skip, Laffy snuck into Rogama headquarters and told Sengoku and company and Doflamingo and Mihawk about Blackbeard, and no one was the wiser. Sneak stats are high with Laffy, and he also knows hypnotism. Maybe do it on pudding to have it read the poneglyphs, stuff like that. Yeah, so Laffy's bounty could be shockingly high. Let's even higher than a Von Augur or Pizarro or Burgess, stuff like that. Very, very possible. But I would say outside of those captains, and of course Kuzan, San Juan Wolf, Doc Q, Vasco Shot, Stronger, no. I don't think they would exceed 1 billion. I don't think so. Though I would argue that amongst that lot, Doc Q is the most likely to actually be over 1 billion, because it is revealed in the data books that Doc Q had the highest bounty among the original 5 that we see in Jaya at a 72 million berry bounty. However, there's also another crew that's in a similar position as the Blackbeard Pirates, and that is the Redhaired Pirates. Yeah. And I would say for them, it's probably the complete reverse. What do I mean? We know in the Ultimate Chapter, chapter 957, it's Ben Beckman, Rue, and Yasop. They are mentioned by name in that chapter, and no other commanders are mentioned by name. So it's very, very likely that those 3 guys, Ben Beckman, Rue, Yasop, over Bill. But it's also solidified by the fact that the Redhaired Pirates, they have the weakest fleet. They have the weakest armada out of any other Yonko. Blackbeard's armada, Luffy's currently, Buggy's, their armada is so weak that Kid was dunking on them. Like, yo, who are these guys? What? Do they belong here? They're trash. Every Yonko in existence, their armadas are better than Shanks's now. Which only does what? Elevate the strength of the core crew. Meaning that Ben Beckman, Lucky Roo, Yasop, Lime Juice, Bunk Punch, Build Snake, Hongo, Gab, and potentially Rockstar all have bounties over 1 billion. Now, obviously, Monster the Monkey, 1 million. Yeah. The strongest among the pet classes, you know, like the strongest among the Choppers and even the Pizarros, which are on discount as of late. That being said, when we see Marineford and we see Shanks' crew pull up, that's his fighting force. Keep that in mind. The other cats in his crew, like Gertoni and Pududu and Lanaria, the girl that was mentioned in the last SBS, no. Even though they are notable in some ways, they are noteworthy in some respects, they're still really, really weak compared to the average New World crew. So Shanks' crew is clearly top heavy, with the core crew being in the main factors in any, let's say, large scale battle, by far. And right now it's hard to say if the Giants are part of that core crew. It really is. So outside of Monster, I can definitely see a few of the main core guys of his crew being over 1 billion. Absolutely. Rockstar is I don't know about Rockstar, but everybody else, yeah. Hongo, Gab, Bone Punch, yeah. I can see them all being over 1 billion. And then finally, last but not least, Monkey D. Dragon and the Revolutionary Army. These guys are a bit tricky. They're very, very tricky. Ivankov and Sabo, they should be over 1 billion. I would say Ivankov, maybe less so, but Sabo, absolutely. Sabo has to be like in the 2s and 3s. Yeah, Sabo has to be in the 2s and 3s of billion. So Sabo's current bounty is extremely low. A dragon is the issue here. Because when I was growing up, I remember that Dragon's moniker was the world's most wanted man. I forgot where it came from, but the idea was that he was the person that had the highest bounty in the crew. But when you go back, when you check the official translations of those chapters, he's not the world's most wanted man, he's the world's worst criminal. He's the insurgent serpent. He has nicknames like those, but not the world's most wanted man. Meaning that by default, he does not have the highest bounty in the series, as far as I understand. I could be wrong there, I'll admit that, I could be wrong. But as far as I can tell, Dragon's bounty could definitely be lower than Roger's and Whitebeard's. It could be in the 4s. It could be, let's say, in the 5s, but let's say not as high as Gold D. Rogers. And that's what things are pretty damn tricky. So again, I could be wrong in interpreting the translations. Yeah, I could be, fair enough, fine. And if I am wrong, let me know. Let me know in the comment section down below, fair enough. But I think there's a chance here. Dragon and Akainu could be relative. Considering their history, they could be relative to one another in terms of their bounties. Where Dragon could be in the the low 4 billions. That is possible. Or wherever it kind of would be in terms of bounty. Or it could be maybe actually up there with Gold D. Roger. Maybe. It's hard to say. It really, really is. So Dragon's ceiling is, again, I'll admit it's high. But at this point in time, right now, I'm not convinced that it's going to be up there, like surpassing the bounty of Gold D. Roger. It may, but I have my doubts at this point in time. I definitely do. So that's my video. That's my take on the highest hidden bounties in the world of One Piece. Let me know your thoughts on this topic. If you enjoy my video content, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and click on that bell to join the notification squad. I'm gonna catch you guys on the flip side.
See you. Bye-bye.